upon the council members in the order that I see them to introduce themselves. So, Alan, can you go first?
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm calling remotely. I'm not in my office today, but happy to join. I represent the federal sector, including the Department of Government Efficiency. Well, maybe not quite yet, maybe next week. We might be rolled into that as well, but I'm currently with the Bureau of Land Management in Billings, Montana.
Thanks, Alan. And then it looks like next on my list is Eric.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Spangenberg. I'm with the Lewis-Clark County GIS, Lewis-Clark County, City of Helena GIS. I'm the MAGIP representative to council. So actually, technically, I am representing on council as a GIS professional, but a member of the MAGIP organization.
Thanks, Eric. Joe Kaufman.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to get my camera to work and just got my microphone unmuted. But yeah, my name is Joe Kaufman. I'm in the Montana Association of Registered Land Surveyors representative.
Great, thanks, Joe. John Lewis, one of our newer members.
Hi, I'm John Lewis. I'm a private industry representative. I work out of Missoula for Montana Forest Consultants.
Thanks for joining us. Karen Coleman.
Good morning. I'm Karen Coleman. I work for the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, and I'm a council member representing state government.
And Lee.
Good morning. I'm Lee Mackholtz. I am the GIS manager for the City of Missoula, and I am a local government representative to the council.
Thanks, Lee. And I see Maureen Sealander. Morning, Maureen.
Good morning. I'm Maureen Sealander, and I am the GIS manager for Custer County in Miles City, Montana, and I represent local government on the board.
Thanks, Maureen. And I see Valentine. Morning, Valentine.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Valentine Hoff. I represent the Montana University system. I work in Missoula at the University of Montana. And I have to apologize, I have to leave a little early because I have to teach a class later this morning.
We certainly understand. Appreciate you being here. I think those are all the members of the council that are with us. Erin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Fashaway. I am the state GIS coordinator with the Montana State Library, and I staff the council.
Great, thanks. We have a number of other staff and guests. We really appreciate our guests joining us today and look forward to having you share public comment if you have anything you want to add to our discussions. And we have staff who are going to be presenting as well. So let's go ahead and get started with our agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve our meeting minutes from our November 14th, 2024 business meeting?
I'd move to approve the November 14th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Thanks, Eric. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Maureen. Is there any further discussion about the meeting minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you. Let's move into our discussion items, starting with an update on our strategic planning and our goal to improve the spatial data value.
Right.
Erin, are you going to kick this off, or should I turn
I
it to
am.
you?
Yeah. I will introduce the topic, and then Troy and Michael will be doing presentations. And so okay, so Caroline, I see so Caroline Pasaltis, she's helping us because we are short in admin right now. And so I really appreciate her help. So if you could make sure they're both able to present. So this is continuing the conversation on a lot of the work that we have done for our strategic, achieving our strategic goals. So just I guess for ease of use and finding, I added the improving spatial data value business plan there that we've been operating from. And so today we are building on the work we have started. And to introduce the topic, you've got that improving geospatial data value business plan in front of you. I don't expect you all to read it right, now. You can dive into it. So I think many of you already have. I'm not going to step through it because we've already kind of introduced that. I do believe it was last spring, but it just continues to build on what we are attempting to complete with standardizing our spatial data infrastructure, laying out expectations, and getting and then getting everything better documented, standardized across the board in how we manage and maintain and plan for the spatial data infrastructure. So what you will be seeing today are two examples of how we are going to work through what we're calling our data matrix. And we did a high level overview of these last year, but what we're at this spot where we want the council's feedback, and we'll step through that with that workflow memo that will follow up the two presentations, and then we'll discuss the calendar. So we introduced these topics to the theme leads in our annual training this past November. And we started kind of doing the training and orientation to creating these data matrices, and the expectations of once you have a data matrix, then what you do with it. And so those data matrices will inform our land information plans, and then how we will prioritize development of each of the spatial data infrastructure layers moving forward. So without further ado, I think we should just jump right into it. And then Troy, if you could please start first, since you're first up on the agenda, and you can just go ahead and take over screen share. So the reason why we chose these two, so these were actually done in cooperation with our consultant AppGeo while we were developing the business plan. And the point was to have two folks within staff who felt comfortable, who knew how to, who went through this process with the consultant, and then learned it themselves, so then could teach it to respective theme leads. And so I believe Troy and Michael feel very comfortable with where they're at in not only developing these for theme leads within the MSL, but teaching others how to develop these theme leads. So with that, Troy.
Yeah, Aaron, so Michael and I were able to put our presentations together, and we're going to go through the whole process here. We're going to focus a bit on some examples from structures and elevation, but our goal here is to really just kind of show the whole process and what it looks like and what we're asking of theme leads. So Michael, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
I don't think I am.
Yes.
I do.
Are you seeing it, Troy? I don't want to get started.
I just see an agenda right now.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the agenda too.
So Caroline's only sharing her screen.
How do I do that? I'm
think-
I see
yeah.
MSDI data quality matrix.
I'm seeing that too.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I'm gonna stop sharing. There we go. I think.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that.
Good
All right,
now,
now is
Michael.
everyone seeing a PowerPoint presentation?
We are seeing the
Yes.
version of with the slides on the side. So if you're presenting elsewhere, I think that this is fine for now, though.
Yeah, okay. So again, this is all coming out of the strategic plan that we went through. One of the goals of which was to continue to improve collection, maintenance, and dissemination of authoritative geospatial data. And so, you know, thinking more about that, the value really of the MSDI in this data is ensuring that it can be used for all sorts of different purposes, and has all the quality measures and things that make it relevant and useful for those different uses. So digging more into that, how do you actually assess that or define that or quantify that? And that's where, as Aaron mentioned, working with AppGeo, we kind of defined and worked through these data quality dimensions or measures. That includes precision and accuracy, consistency, completeness, integrity, timeliness, relevance, and it could include others depending on your theme or the data that you're working with. But those are the main ones we focused on. And so really going through this exercise, we just applied those to each of our themes. And again, we went through it with structures and addresses and then elevation. And then so kind of high level, the idea is to work through this for all the MSDI themes. So kind of an overall workflow for each theme is to convene your working group. One thing I think Troy and I both recognize and feel strongly about is we kind of worked through this. Well, one, we were working with AppGeo at first and it was online and they kind of introduced the concept to us. And then Troy and I were both like, okay, we'll go and, you know, fill some of this stuff in, which we both did. But then coming back to the AppGeo group on the following meeting, we kind of worked through it and quite a bit changed, or we, you know, massaged things quite a bit. So we both recognized that while we might be quote unquote the experts in our particular theme, there's a lot of value in making sure that many people have input from, you know, consumers and users to data producers and contributors, that they're all involved in these themes, to make sure you're kind of capturing all those different perspectives. And that's where the working group concept comes in. So, but we also recognize there's some flexibility there. It's, you know, quite possible to work through it kind of like Troy and I did, make a first attempt at filling it in, and then once you have at least something there for people to kind of think about and look at and review, then bring it to them to get their feedback. So that's where we kind of quantify or qualify the working group part of it, because you might want to do it in the beginning, you might want to work on this yourself and then bring it in front of your working group to review and get feedback from. But basically, you're going to go through and fill in kind of these data quality dimensions and refine things. And I'll bring up that. So this is kind of the template spreadsheet that AppGeo developed and we started working from. It's basically the data quality dimensions are listed kind of across here at the top. And then we kind of broke it out as where is the data set currently? What's a long-term goal for each of these, or goals for each of these dimensions? And then what are some kind of near terms or more short-term goals or steps that can lead us towards meeting that long-term goal. And that's where these current near-term and long-term needs and practices kind of come in. And it could be one or more data sets with structures and addresses. It's basically a single data set with elevation. You've got some different data sets in there and derivatives that may or may not, need to be evaluated individually. So kind of working through that, we populated each of these for each of our themes. And so I won't run through every single thing here, I don't think. But just to kind of give you an idea of what we did, structures and addresses, current practice, spatial accuracy. Spatial accuracy is pretty important. When I think about kind of the three major use cases right now that I would put foremost for structures and addresses in Montana, that's one, 911, preparing for next gen 911 and their use within that. Two, their use in elections and helping with voter registration and assigning voters to the right precincts and ballot. And three, broadband mapping. And so that's broadband internet, access and things like that. All three require address data sets. All three have varying levels of spatial accuracy requirements. Technically speaking, right now, for 911, an address point doesn't have to be located on the structure. That is considered the best practice, and it's pretty much where everyone's going, but it's not technically a requirement. It can be located elsewhere. And within the next gen 911 GIS data model, there are attributes that can help define where that address point is located to at least give the user an indication of that spatial accuracy. But generally speaking, over the last few years, the practice and effort has been put into moving those address points to being on or pretty darn close to that structural location. It varies a little bit county to county, but that's kind of where we're at. I think we recognize that the ideal is to have them on the structure, and for elections and broadband mapping purposes, they really need to be on the structure. We were just looking at a situation recently with Secretary of State where a particular address point or a particular house was actually kind of split by a precinct. And where that address point was located on kind of one side of the house or the other made a difference in terms of which precinct, and in fact, county in this case, it was a county boundary too, which county that voter would be assigned to. So it can kind of get down to that level of precision and accuracy that's needed on that. And then broadband mapping, I think technically the requirement is to have that address point fall within the building footprint, which brings up a whole host of other issues because then you're assessing it based on a building footprint data set, which can have its own quality issues that I'm sure Troy can probably get into more if he wanted to, in terms of most of that data is obtained through LiDAR and or imagery. So, that's a whole nother aspect of it. But getting back to the structures and the spatial accuracy assessment, the current practice again is to have it located close to or on. The ideal is to have it completely on that structure. Some near-term goals then, and like I said, I think we're getting close to this, is to just have it on the structure. Working through another example, consistency, and see if it's here. No, it's in the template. We often had to kind of keep going back to these definitions or descriptions of what the dimensions were. just to kind of remind ourselves of, what exactly is consistency when we're talking about geospatial data. And that's a measure of the similarities and differences between the data stored in multiple data sets or databases. That was kind of how we were defining it for these purposes. So when we're talking about structures, it's a federated data set. Most of the data coming into that is coming from local governments, tribal governments, the addressing authorities across the state of Montana. And right now, I get kind of sporadic and irregular updates. A particular county, might update 1 month and might go several months or a year before being updated again. So the consistency between the address data set that we have in the MSDI and the address data set that exists at that county then start to diverge over time as those updates move away in the past. So the ideal is to get to a point where we can ensure that the MSDI data has the same data that exists at the county or at the tribal organization or at the city that's assigning those addresses. And that's both, having the same address and then having all the same attribution and standards that minimally need to be used for whatever purpose, whether it's 911 or elections or broadband or any other use for that matter. And again, the near-term goal is to try to get those timeframes where there are differences less and less, decreasing. And some of these, I'll note, some of these different quality dimensions kind of hinge on one another or have a relationship to another one. So we'll move over to timeliness. Timeliness has an aspect to consistency and vice versa. So, we were talking about consistency between the two data sets, but in the structures example, in a federated data model that we're using, that is in a lot of ways, or a large component of that comes down to timeliness and that data sharing frequency. So I kind of basically, explained how that consistency was being impacted by the timeliness of data updates for structures. Another one would be completeness. Completeness can be one that might be a little more difficult to assess depending on the theme. Elevation, you have values, completely across the extent of a data set, for example. An address data set will be a little bit more difficult to assess how complete it is because you don't have, a full address data set to compare it with, for example. So you're kind of relying on other ways of checking completeness. And it might be other data sets too. But in terms of the way we're kind of working with this, we can look at completeness also from an aspect of attribution and assessing whether a data set has all the minimal and required attributes needed. And that would be another measure of completeness. For structures, we're doing that with the one spatial data validation and aggregation portal software. So that goes through and runs a whole bunch of checks on the attribution and whether or not it's complete. And I'm just refreshing my memory here. So kind of feeding all the data through that portal, validating it, and then going back and completing the attribution where it might be missing. Does anyone have any questions on kind of this process and how we went through the evaluation in that regard, working through the matrix.
Anybody have any questions or feedback for Michael?
Michael, you mentioned that in this theme, structures and addresses, the uses are 911, elections, and then what was that third one?
Broadband internet mapping.
Okay.
And those aren't the only uses. We know it's used for wildfire mapping. DNRC uses it. The BLM used it instead of kind of their national standard data set for some fires here in Montana last summer. A whole host of other state agencies use it for all sorts of purposes. I heard about MDT using it years ago for infrastructure surveys and things like that. So that's kind of the beauty of the MSDI, is making it publicly available allows for a whole host of uses, and sometimes uses that even us as the theme stewards and theme leads aren't even aware of. So getting kind of back to this overall workflow, working through that spreadsheet, populating all those the data quality dimensions and things like that, and then that'll then feed into a data value improvement plan. So taking those different things, figuring out what actions need to occur to get a particular theme up to those short-term or long-term goals, and then putting it into a plan to actually act upon. So it's identifying those actions and outcomes you want. That data improvement plan will guide and be a large portion of the MSDI theme plans that we're going to be working on over the next year and a half or so. And then it'll be also a great way to periodically check the progress of how we are improving and making progress on these data improvements. So I've kind of gone through some of this already. I'll go through a few slides here and turn it over to Troy. But again, working through those different data quality dimensions, precision and accuracy, those have a lot of different, well, those have different meanings and different ways of assessing both those depending on a particular data set. In the structures and addresses example, each accuracy would be ensuring each address is represented by a point within, again, 2 meters of a structure or so. And then in terms of the precision, coordinates are stored with enough precision that if you're dropping the point there over and over, it's essentially capturing that same point location, and that the point isn't drifting all over the place because it doesn't have the accuracy or the precision to accurately reflect where it should be. Moving on to consistency, again, that's those similarities and differences. A statewide address database is going to have the same set of addresses that a county or the addressing authority has at any given time. In the elevation example, a LiDAR point cloud classification might be inconsistent. For example, sometimes vegetation is included in the classification. Most of the time it is not. Some DEMs are hydro-enforced, most are not. So those are, again, examples of a data set that might not be consistent across the board depending on whatever was defined in terms of the collection or the outputs as part of that project. And completeness, again, a measure of both spatial and accuracy completeness, a measure whether data are comprehensive with all phenomena being represented and all required observations populated, or required and priority fields populated. So again, an address database might not contain every address, but we can measure whether a lot of the minimal attributes are there. In the elevation example, a 1 meter DEM covers the entire state. So every pixel across the state has a value. A DEM data set that covers the entire state but has some gaps, possibly due to some situation during collection or whatever way that DEM was produced. If you're missing values, then it's not going to be complete. Any questions before I turn it over to Troy? Okay.
Thanks, Michael.
Let's continue on there. So that's the next one here. And Michael, if you will advance the slides for me, we'll have to switch our sharing, but on that untimeliness, Michael hit on this for structures, where it's about the update cycle and how that aligns with when the statewide data set gets updated versus county. For LiDAR or for elevation data, the example that I want to point out is that turnaround time. So when the acquisition first starts to when the data is finally delivered is around 2 years. And so for me, it's thinking about what are the impacts of that? Is that acceptable? Are we able to meet the needs? What is that LiDAR being collected for if it's not delivered for 2 years later? What are the impacts of that? And so we've seen that play out before, like with the Yellowstone flooding that happened in 2022. LiDAR was collected for Park County in 2020, and it flooded. We didn't get that data until about 2022. That same year is when the 2022 floods happened. And so that data, at least for flood risk mapping, needed to be recollected. So that's part of this timeliness. It's not just about the update cycle. It's also about thinking, is the data being received and processed in time for it to be used in the way it was intended? So on the next one, Michael. Integrity, and Michael hit on this one really well with addresses. This is really looking at the entire life cycle of the data set, and is there consistency and completeness throughout the entire process? I think for both structures and elevation, and probably all our other themes, integrity is really about standards and setting data processing standards and good documentation there. Yeah, go ahead to the next one. So this last one here is relevance. And so this is really getting at how is the data going to be used, and are you meeting those needs? And so that key question of is the data available to inform business questions? And so for LiDAR and elevation, one of the things we identified there is this data are regularly used for flood risk and vegetation structure mapping. Yet a lot of what's coming from USGS isn't a full point cloud classification. So some of those uses, the data is not ideal for those at this point. And so that's something we've identified through the plan. In the future, let's make sure we also try to get vegetation classification. All right, let's go on. So Michael introduced this at the beginning, but this is kind of that whole workflow of how this matrix gets done. So again, we're calling a matrix. It's that spreadsheet that Michael was just showing. So asking each theme lead to go through that spreadsheet, think about their theme, think about each of these measures, and fill that spreadsheet out. Michael mentioned that you could go through this as the theme lead yourself and then take it to a larger group, to a working group to review and make additions there. You might also want to start with the working group from the beginning. You might try to identify a facilitator, or you might want to work with Michael and I. Since we've been through the process, we're willing to work with the theme leads and walk them through the process. There's going to be parts of it, like maybe relevance and how that data is used. It might be better for a partner to fill out. And so thinking about who you want to assign to help with the work would be good. And then the key thing, that very last bullet, we are asking to look at what is the current state of the data set, what are some near-term quality improvements, and what are some long-term quality improvements. making sure to hit on those 3 aspects as well. All right, so next slide. I think this is just the spreadsheet. Michael went through this. You saw the examples there for structures and addresses, and then elevation was right below that. And I think the only thing I'll reiterate there for elevation is, unlike structures and addresses, elevation has a lot of different data sets associated with it, like derivative products. So you've got the bare earth model, you've got a surface model, hill shade. And so those get documented in there as well. And so we have a number of other themes like that, boundaries, many different layers involved in that as well. And so we are looking throughout the entire theme and all the layers that are associated and trying to fill this out. So just on the left there, you see what that looks like. It's just listing each of those different layers that are involved with elevation down the left. And you know, the measures, there's a lot of overlap there. Like on a number of these, I just put same as or ditto on those. So there is overlap there, but there's also quite a few differences there too that need to get documented. All right, we're going back to the PowerPoint. So once we've had theme leads go through this matrix and really thinking about, you know, what are the deficiencies in their data, then it's about identifying what actions can be taken to improve those. And this slide is just showing, you know, this is just a sample of what some of those, what technical means might you take to make, you know, improve on some of those deficiencies. You've of course got quality control and quality assurance. A lot of this is about documentation. I mean, our theme leads have been doing this for a long time. We've got, I mean, most of them 5, 10 plus years of experience. They've been doing this. So a lot of it's about documenting it, getting the processes down on paper. Setting standards, data standards is going to be a big push, I'm sure, over the next couple of years with all MSDI themes. And then, of course, with training, I think Michael was talking about how sometimes the county data that comes in isn't quite ready for state. And so some of that's about training. And so having theme leads identify for their data sets what training needs and education is needed there. All right, next one. So after that, so you go through this data quality matrix, fill out that spreadsheet, you identify the actions to help get at those deficiencies. And then from that, we want a data improvement plan coming out of that. And this is really a 1 or 2 pager that goes through each of those measures and sets some goals and sets the actions, and then sets kind of a timeline and puts some bounds on what's realistic versus might need some more resources. Why don't you go ahead and bring that up? Yeah, go to the next slide and bring up that template plan. So this is the template plan for elevation. So just the theme at the top there, and then in that next box there, we're just setting the overall goal. So trying to write out that spreadsheet in kind of a narrative form. And then below that is where it gets into each of the different measures that we're talking about and identifies an outcome and an action, and then kind of tracks the progress. So like for elevation there on that first one, or let's go an easier one to understand, like maybe the third one down there. So like here with spatial accuracy. So most of the LiDAR being collected for the state right now is quality level 2. We're recognizing uses that require quality level 1. And so one of the goals identified throughout here is in the future, as new LiDAR is being collected, let's require or strongly encourage the collection of quality level 1 LiDAR. And so that lies out that action, what the end goal is, and then you know, when do we want to start working towards that? And then if you go to the template, there are a few additional fields here that Michael and I have not gone through yet with our example. And I think these are key ones. So on the end there, level of effort, staff time that's needed, level of effort, external support that would be needed, what are the infrastructure costs? And then you see the note there from the contractor. Maybe we also want to track feasibility here, that maybe we can't get to ideal within 5 years, but we should still document that and mention that it's something that we would hope to work towards in the future. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint. Oh, was that all of it? Okay? Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Yeah, so go back one more slide, just kind of one more time on the kind of a review of what happens here. So each data theme, we want each of them to go through the matrix. From that matrix, identify the actions that you would take, and those actions go into this data improvement plan. And then that data improvement plan informs the creation of the full MSDI plan. So Aaron, I don't know if you want to take it from there and questions for the council, or if you want me to kind of give my perspective there, or.
You want to give your perspective first, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I see this data improvement plan as being the real key piece of it, like that 1-2 pager that really outlines the goals, what are the actions, and then tracking that progress. So we would like for each theme to at least get through the matrix, create one of these plans here, this kind of 2-pager thing. And then from that, with their working group, form the larger state plan, MSDI team plan, sorry. So I think the questions for the council would be, would you like each of the spreadsheet matrix presented for each theme? Would you like to wait a little longer until it gets to that theme, to the theme plan in the end? Or what involvement would you like to have throughout the process?
Right, so that would, I do have a memo, but I like that you're showing this too. So that would be the memo that was included with the agenda. And so it basically lays out, basically giving a high level overview of what we've done, what we're trying to achieve. It references the calendar and then goes through. So this was, pretty high level detail of what each theme will be going through. And what we want to know is, so that we're being as transparent as possible with the council. We want to know what the council wants to see from us, where you want to be able to give recommendations, endorsements, and some of these documents you're gonna have to understand are going to be working documents. Right now we've got a lot to discuss, and so we left plenty of time in the agenda to discuss this. So we have each theme lead. We're going to ask each theme lead to create these matrices for their respective theme. And then from that comes that 2-pager data improvement plan. Now I kind of included that in that memo as part of the data quality matrix, but we certainly can separate that out so it just makes more sense to everyone. So the data theme quality matrix would be completed. And then that improvement plan following having that quality matrix would be completed as Troy had stated. In addition to that, a working group would be either created or reconvened. And so we're going to have the expectation that theme leads will be regularly meeting with their working groups, at least annually. And then it'll become ad hoc for when, issues arise or there's major discussions to be had. So that we are constantly in communication with our stakeholders, and we are, not working by ourselves in a vacuum. And then the thought is we would present these matrices completed to the council, and they would also be presented to the working group so that that they could be given feedback. We would present the theme plans to the council as well. But right now, based on what we've done in the past, because the matrices are new and the data improvement plans are new, we've only endorsed theme plans. And so the 2 theme plans that have been endorsed by the council over the past, I think, 5 years was Elevations, one that was written by Troy with the help of his working group. And basically that outlined how we were going to collect LiDAR and all the products that were going to be coming out of LiDAR. And then the land cover plan that was written by Jessica Mitchell, who is the theme lead for land cover. And she worked with her working group as well. So that is where we're at. So we want to know much input the council would like to have along the way, knowing that the theme lead will be working with their working group. So do you want to wait till the very end and see the theme plan, or where would you like to be involved in the process? And so we could pull up, if it helps for visuals, we can pull up the memo, we can leave this this PowerPoint, but that's where we wanted to start this this discussion.
First I want to welcome Brian and acknowledge that in the chat, Brian said probably a little bit later in the process would be of value. So that's his vote, he said. I wanted to talk too about how I see this information informing the work of the council, which might also help us think about the level of involvement that the council has. You know, I think we have a lot of themes, and you all know that we're not able to support all of the themes at the same level, and certainly we're not able to provide funding for the development of all of the themes. And so I think having these matrices and these data improvement plans, I think it will help us set priority goals for our geospatial information plan, and then better understand how, with scarce resources, we might be able to allocate those resources. And when we had our meeting with the theme leads last month, I think we heard a lot of great support and buy-in for this idea, but we also know that people get busy. And I think we're asking for quite a bit from the theme leads. I think it's a very reasonable ask for people to take on this amount of work and be responsible for understanding what it's going to take to make sure that the data is really meeting people's needs. That's why we're doing this. So, one of the questions that's sort of in the back of my mind is, what happens if we find that theme leads aren't able to complete this work or meet some of the expectations that we're setting for those themes? I think that's a question that would come to the council as well. So, there's significant effort that will go into this, and significant value that I think will come from this work in ensuring that our data is meeting the needs of our users. And so that effort is not wasted, but we also need to then think about the larger application of this work to the work of the council and our planning and use of resources that we have. The one other point I wanted to make about this is, in your representative roles as council members, being really familiar with and aware of those MSDI themes that are of most use to the stakeholders that you represent, and being able to understand the themes, communicate what is included in the themes and those values, and to be able to also then communicate back what you're hearing from your peers and colleagues to the theme leads, I think is an important opportunity that comes with this work. I know there was a comment from Alan as well. I'd like to see members of the working groups and maybe where they could be lacking input, maybe a role we could help with. I think that's right, Alan. That's a good way of making that point.
Yeah, I think we might be able to help fill in the gaps if there are any gaps. I mean, not that we all have great influence out there, but you never know who we might know in our circle that would be a good person to pull into the working groups. I guess it'd be nice to know who those folks are that they've rounded up.
Okay, so what I'm hearing right now, and I just want to make sure that we are documenting this correctly and understanding it. So right now, the first suggestion is to wait a little longer until things are more fleshed out. So let's dive into that a little further. So would the council like to see each theme once the data matrices are completed? Would they like a presentation to see their progress? Or would you prefer waiting until a data improvement plan is created or would you like them both at the same time? So there's a lot we're trying to dive through here right now.
Hi, this is Karen. I'm a detail person, and I like the idea of seeing the matrix and just like having more touch points along the way as the theme leads go through this process. And I don't know if we necessarily need to endorse the matrix as like an action item, but just having more opportunity to understand what the theme's about and what the issues are before we get to that point of having to endorse a plan. That's that's how I see it.
You feel like that would help you be better informed?
Yes, I do.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but I'm looking at your MSDI year at a glance, that calendar that you sent, and I do see that where, in May, for example, you're having MSDI cadastral mapping and hydrography matrices. So that would kind of be to the point of what Karen just referenced, and the same thing then in July, we get to see administrative boundaries, imagery, and climate matrices, and so forth and so forth. So I think you're seeing those matrices, and so to that point, I think that kind of addresses a little bit of what Karen might have just asked about. I personally, I like to let the folks who know the stuff the best, flesh out everything and then just bring it to us. That's where I'm on board with what Brian said as well. In the chat, I think that's what mentioned it. Yeah. So, and your memo, those 6 bullet points on your memo, I'm fairly comfortable with that. Letting us see the matrix, then let them develop the theme, and then point 6, council endorsing that end theme plan, type of thing. And then Karen's point about maybe, hey, just let us see the matrix, see where it's going, see how it's going. Because you're right. I was looking at that imagery when I was like, oh crap, I totally forgot about the hydro enforced hydrography type side of things. When you start looking at the elevation data sets, there's you're kind of, you have your area that you look at, and then suddenly you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So I guess that's just to address, to bring that, kind of ramble on with my little points.
And I wanted to present the council I guess a calendar of what potentially could be. This is, if this, I certainly will update this, but in order for us to actually, really do a great job of developing the geospatial information plan, which we'll get to later, we have to flesh out some of these basic procedural, like what you want to see, when we have to be ready, and so that we can properly move our staff and the rest of the theme leads and train them through these processes. So I appreciate that. And so Brian, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I agree with, what Karen and Eric were saying, that I think you have to you got to strike that balance, right? We certainly want to help weigh in and be involved when appropriate, but we don't want to bog down, the work that you're doing and dig through the nitty gritty on everything. So I guess I just wanted to clarify that, but I thought what they both said was, somewhere right there in the middle.
One of the thoughts that is in my mind, and Evan, thank you for this. One of the things I think would be of value is just a dashboard that's tracking our progress on completing this work that we can make available to the council, that would have links out to the matrices in whatever form their completeness is, or the plans as they are developing, so that the council has an idea of how much progress we're making towards completing this effort, and give you opportunities to see that work as it's developing, and ask questions or ask us to bring items to council meetings where you feel that might be necessary. Any other feedback for us?
Another thing we had suggested was to provide templates for endorsement to the council, and that would likely come at the next meeting. Does the council want to take action on that so we can properly prepare, or would you simply like us to present our example of what, I guess it would be, every theme plan is going to be a little different depending upon the theme, because they're just all kind of different, but we're going to try to standardize to the best of our ability. And so would you like to see like the minimum of what we would recommend and require to be in an MSDI theme plan in order for that to be deemed complete?
Erin, this is Maureen. I think one of the things I would like to add is when you're developing these plans and stuff, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that you need to flush out. And I don't think we need to be in the weeds on that. We trust you guys, and I think you're doing a very good, thorough plan on this. And I would just like to see, just like Eric said, you know, as you develop this stuff and you feel it's ready to present something, then we are ready to give our feedback at that time.
Okay, wonderful.
I would agree with that too.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Who said that?
Oh, I did. Sorry, Alan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. That was a good statement.
Okay. Thank you. So
I would agree with that too, Joe Kaufman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So did I capture that correctly? If you guys can see my screen, I've got, so the MSDI theme leads will present their working group members to the council. Council can help provide recommendations on filling the gaps. MSDI theme leads present matrix and data improvement plans to the council. No endorsement needed, but you certainly will give feedback. MSDI theme plan templates, the MSL will present to the council as we develop those and for feedback, and then but the council will actually take endorsement on each of the individual theme plans, knowing that they went through these processes with each working group. Is that a fair assessment of what we just discussed?
Erin, we don't see your screen, but
Hold on one more time.
I think that that covers mine. I really do think we want some kind of council endorsement at some point, and if it's at the point of the plans, I'm good with that, especially as we start seeing more application of the plans in creating our geospatial information plan priorities. You know, perhaps we get to the point where we're awarding grants in support of these plans. You know, if we ever have to think about adding a theme or reducing the number of themes that we have, knowing that the council has seen and endorsed those plans to help inform those future decisions, to me, I think is important.
Yes, what I'm seeing on the screen looks good. I like that.
Can I just ask for clarification? I'm wondering if I fell asleep somewhere. Is the data improvement plan different than the theme plan?
Yeah, good point. So the data improvement plan basically takes that matrices and synthesizes it. And then that will, it's like a 2-pager. It's like it is in tabular format. And then that greater plan will be more, I guess, what's the right term? We'll have both qualitative and quantitative information in it, and it will give more written description of the theme itself, and then the look forward. Does that make sense? Michael and Troy, did I do a good job?
You did.
Explaining that?
Yeah, you did. I would add though too, like I don't know if they necessarily have to be different. Like, I think the data improvement plan is the most important piece of this. And so if the council's okay with it, we could say that what we're trying to produce for each theme is the data improvement plan with those goals and those actions. And that 2 or 3 pager would be what we adopt as the plan. But if like additional contact text there is needed, then, something more involved, a 10-page theme plan might be necessary. But I would argue that, some long written out thing might sit on the shelf, that it's really that table, that 2-pager with the goals and the actions that people are going to move forward with.
I think also the plan, it could, you could expand it and give the, achieved goal dates and whatnot. That might not be in that 2-pager. I think it's also nice to get more information and some of those use case scenarios, which are always nice. And they help us, especially when working with policymakers, things like that. But again, we're not writing, we don't want to encourage the writing of long plans that are just going to sit on a shelf, like Troy alluded to. This is, we want it to be concise and meet the needs of what we are trying to achieve here. Karen, does that help?
Yes. I guess
Okay.
what I'm kind of hearing is like maybe the data improvement plan may comprise the bulk of the theme plan, but there might be a need or opportunity to add like some narrative or something around it. Does that sound like a good sum up?
I think that's right on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. Thanks.
If I can help provide another scenario there, Troy and I were working on collaborating with our stakeholders to understand the use and the need for imagery. And so we started doing an imagery inventory and then like a needs analysis. And so we have not gone through the process of creating that the matrix yet, but that information that we've gathered from those other 2 documents will help both inform those. The information we gathered in the needs assessment will also kind of be able to give that, wrap that narrative around what we are trying to achieve. So the improvement plan might say the technical piece of, we need to have a centralized architecture where all historic imagery is stored in one location or accessible in one location for the state of Montana. And then that narrative would basically describe why. Right.
Thank you for the great discussion. Any other feedback or questions, comments? Erin, do you feel like you and Troy and Michael feel like you got what you wanted from this conversation? I think it was really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that will help us further develop and be able to put the finishing touches on the geospatial information plan and then realign the calendar. And so that was I think that's, sorry, I've got many things open on my machines right now. What was the next up on the agenda? So the calendar, I pull it up. I think we've alluded this, that there's a lot, but we feel like it's reasonable from our perspective, and we are going to be busy for the next 2 or 3 years as the council, making sure that we're bringing all these themes up to standard. Like Troy had said, a lot of us are working off of standards. This is just formalizing the process across the board. And so based on what you had just given us our discussion on and feedback, we'll modify the calendar to make sure that it aligns with some of that feedback. But just wanted to throw this out there and allow for discussion if we think that this is too aggressive, and get your feedback. What my goal was to try to get every single MSDI theme plan that's listed on the calendar to present a plan to the council by the end of next fiscal year. And so it is aggressive, and we obviously can pivot when we can, but that is my hope. So then we're all working off of a plan and we are all up to standard. So I just wanted to get your feedback on that.
Questions or comments from the council about the calendar? I personally really like it because I think it helps organize our work in a really proactive way.
Jenny?
Seeing some thumbs up in the chat.
Cool.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on. I'm sure you're all aware that the legislative session began on January 6th. And so that's been keeping us pretty busy here at the start of the year. Couple of things I wanted to share with the council. If you're not familiar with the state library budget and how it's handled through the legislative process, our budget is contained within House Bill 2, the governor's budget. And our budget hearing is held by Section E, which is the Education Subcommittee of the Joint Appropriations and Senate Financing Claims Committee. And this year, something unique happened for the state library. The Legislative Finance Committee directed each subcommittee to conduct what they called a deep dive into 2 different programs within their sections. And so the state library was selected for a deep dive, which really meant that the committee is looking at all aspects of the work of the state library, our budgets and expenditures, the cost drivers, our key performance measures, opportunities for efficiency, and so forth. So we spent the latter half of last week and Monday, a 3-day deep dive with our budget committee. One whole day was really devoted to our information and data access tools that we make available. And if anybody's interested, those hearings were recorded and are available online. Gave us a great opportunity to talk about the Montana Spatial Data Infrastructure, to educate the committee about what we mean when we're talking about these data themes and the importance of the work of coordination to make sure that we are following standards and that our data is useful to the people that we think should be using the data. Opportunities for greater standardization and use of the various themes across a variety of sectors. We were able to talk about a lot of the use cases for this data and so forth. We got really great feedback about the hearing itself. So I was really excited to have the opportunity to educate this legislative committee in a much more complete way about the importance of this work that we're doing. This committee is, of course, aware of some of the financial concerns that we are facing with the fall off of the Geospatial Information Act funds. And so that is something that they will consider as we go through this legislative process. So we had a 3-day budget hearing. The committee will have a work session next week on the 23rd to have just a discussion amongst committee members about what they heard and ideas they have for our budget. So that'll be on January 23rd. And then closer to the middle of February, the committee will actually start taking action on our budget, considering the recommendations that were put forward by Governor Gianforte. Just so you're aware, Governor Gianforte's budget includes basically inflationary increases for the state library, but no new monies for the state library. So the committee will take action on our budget, including any changes or amendments that they want to make in mid-February, and then it will have some votes before House Appropriations and Senate Finance and Claims and the full House and Senate floor. But overall, this was a unique opportunity for the state library to really draw attention to the important work that we're doing, and we I think did a great job taking advantage of that opportunity. So that's sort of the status of our budget and the process it will go through. And then there is a frenzy, and that is the right word, a frenzy of bill activity right now. There are over 4,300 bill draft requests in the system at this point. That's well over double, going on triple the amount of bills we used to see when I first became state librarian. And I feel very bad for the drafters who are having to draft all of these bills. The majority of them won't be drafted. They won't be introduced. Only a fraction of them will actually get into the process and through the legislative process. And so things are happening sort of fast and furious right now. The legislature has until February 22nd to introduce bills. And so that's why there's so much activity right now and up to the 22nd as legislators are scrambling to get their bills drafted and introduced. So we know that there's these 4,300 bill draft titles. Some of them have language. More of them will have language available for us to review on a daily basis between now and February 22nd. We are starting to see bills that are looking at mapping needs, in particular, some language in a bill draft dropped yesterday that would specifically calls on the state library to update our statewide digital map to include navigable rivers. So we've got some work to do there with the legislature and in coordination with some other state agencies to understand the intent from that legislator and if legislation moves forward, figure out what would actually be a workable process and workflow to meet the intent of the legislature. So lots of work to do there. There's other bill drafts that are looking at administrative boundaries. I know Aaron brought a bill draft to the attention of some of our local government members. So we are actively watching and monitoring, working with the governor's office, reaching out to legislators whenever we see a bill that impacts our work or is an opportunity for us to elevate the work of GIS coordination and use of spatial data. We have not been called upon to endorse any bills at this point or to testify about any bills, but that's likely to happen at some point through the process. I endeavor to send out a weekly update on the status of legislation that we are following. So I will start to do that tomorrow and look to keep that information up to date on a weekly basis. So you can look for emails from me about the bills that we're following. And if there's anything that we think we need to bring to any of your attention, we sure will. Questions, or is anybody else hearing anything about the legislative session that you wanted to bring to our attention?
I don't have anything, but I do recall from past experience, those your status emails were always, I always appreciated getting those. So I
Great.
look forward to seeing those as you guys start following some of these. So
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I would say I agree. Those are very helpful. You know, and if there's places where, you know, federal can pull in for some comment, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that.
Yes, I appreciate that too, Jenny, because it's hard to wade through, like you said, all of that legislation that's up there. So when somebody does that for you, it's very appreciated.
You're welcome. It's a lot this year. More so just because our budget hearing came up so early in the session. Usually our hearing, A, it's just a one-day session, and B, it's usually in the middle of February. So to be first up out of the chute in a 3-day hearing, like I said, we were super grateful for the opportunity, but it's taken our time and attention away from some bills that we know are starting to drop. If you happen to hear anything, you know, you're seeing things in the news or you're hearing rumors about anything, always feel free to reach out. Or if you hear about a bill and you haven't heard anything from us about it, please give us a heads up. All right. Erin, let's move on to the draft geospatial information plan.
Okay. I am going to share my screen here, just one moment. So what I wanted, okay, all right. So the council had met in a working session in December, and I started going over some of the work that we've done to define the gap in the budget, and we will dive into that in our continued discussion here. And so what I wanted to give you was an update of what we had created or what we had been working on. So a lot of this is kind of behind the scenes. And so the actual draft has not changed, and you'll see that there are really no changes there right now. And what we've been working on, we had discussed through our working sessions that we would get several case studies to be included in the geospatial information plan, and I really appreciate the council's work on that. And we've got a few more in the hopper. So I've gotten one written by Maureen on redistricting and how GIS saves time and money for the local government perspective. I received one from John Lewis giving that private industry perspective and story about how MSDI is used in private forestry consultations. And then I have a wildfire research case study written by Valentine, giving that university perspective of how they use the MSDI and wildfire research. And then I believe we'll work on one with the last two that are remaining. We'll do some sort of addressing case study, and also Troy's going to work on a LiDAR, and then I was going to work with the city of Great Falls because we just had really good response from the council and the commission on some of the presentations that Aaron Vaughn had given. So it would be more of a MSDI improving cadastral through collecting new survey control through the grant program. So kind of hitting multiple points of MGIA with MSDI and the grant program. So those are the ones that we hope to finalize here in the next couple weeks. And then we were working on defining and finalizing those workflows for the standardization of MSDI theme procedures. So what we had just discussed. Now that we have those answers we needed from the council, we'll start to frame that into the plan, and then we've been working on defining the budget and the gap of some of those priorities, which we will jump in to in the next discussion item on the agenda. So given the calendar now, let me just look. We want to have the plan out for I do believe 30 days. And so if we present if we publish the plan, the draft plan with all the changes included for comments both to the council and then for public comments, I can have, I think we can have that posted by no later than the 13th of February, and then that would be ready for receipt and publishing back to the council for any final edits and, synthesizing that public comment for a review and endorsement at the March 27th meeting. Just double check my calendar. That looks right. Any thoughts there? Flags?
No, I just real quick, because I'm sure Gail will ask the question, and Gail has me on tap to give reports to the MAGIP board. That publishing time, if you publish it, as you said, February 13th, that would be their time as well for anyone if MAGIP's going to be doing anything involved with making comments.
Yes. Yeah, and I planned on probably writing an official letter from Jenny and I asking for the council or the board's official feedback.
Okay. Yeah, because I know Gail's been kind of following that and wanting more, and so that way I'll have something to say next week. Although I think you were on the agenda for next week as well, if I recall. So.
Yeah, I believe I am.
So okay.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
We'll also, officially send it out. We'll send it out through the normal methods of, all of our working groups, and MACO, League of Cities, and ask them to distribute to their groups. And those might be done a little more officially through like a letter asking, here's our geospatial information plan. We would love for you to distribute it. So it'll be more of an official rather than just a release through email. Any questions there? Okay. I think the other thing that I'd like to request is that when it is released for official public feedback is that that you all would work within your groups to make sure that it's being distributed as well. So they're maybe hearing it from multiple avenues, from the state library and then from their council rep. So it would be wonderful. Anything else to add there, Jenny?
Looks good. Is everybody else in agreement that what Aaron's outlined in the timeline sounds reasonable? Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
All right.
Next up. So I think you guys can see this. And I can pull up the spreadsheet if we want to dive into things a little further. So it's a big table, and big tables always end up looking super teeny tiny on a screen. And so I want you to know that we are taking all of your comments and feedback to heart. And so this was, I think, suggested by many folks. We've always had a difficulty like really defining, what does it cost to operate, maintain a fully functional MSDI? Well, first of all, not every theme is even, at maintenance mode. And then, there's just the discussion of, are we ever, done with what we're doing? Because technology changes, needs change. However, I'm a little proud of what we've completed to date. It was not the most fun process to go through, but I think it's a start. And what I had done was I'd sat down internally with our leads. So that was Kenny Kentner, Michael Hashaway, Troy Blanford, and myself. And I said, okay, let's talk. What do we need immediately? What does it look like? What do we need ASAP within this year and then the next year? And then what does that look like if we project it for 5 years? Is this an ongoing project? Is it a phased project? Is it a one-time only? What does it look like? And so we started to identify and then prioritize and now document for you all what our major needs are that are not being currently met by our revenue nor by the budget. And so in order for us to properly plan for future asks or whatever it may be, we need to have a better understanding of what it's going to cost and what the priorities are. I believe that this probably could change over time once we get more understanding through those data improvement plans, and then we're able to fully prioritize what we can do within the budget. And so this was our one of our first attempts at doing this, and wanted to bring this to your attention today. There's a lot of talk about an imagery program, and I'm going to give a little bit of an update about that later. But we did put that in there as a priority too, seeing as though we keep seeing these major requests, but that's one of the bigger, higher dollar amounts. So I wanted to, draw attention to that. So in the first, I guess the first column, we'll just step through this really quickly. That basically just defines a high level what we're identifying as a need, and we can go through that if you'd like. Then the next one is basically our section that's for more internal purposes, but we thought it would be informational to share. Will it fall under just, basic coordination, our information management, or information products? This is like how we are organized internally, but it also reflects some of those sections that it will benefit the most. So information management is where Troy and Michael are organized, and all that data development. Information products is Kenny and his team. And so that's like, building apps and, maintaining cadastral and so on and so forth. And then the priority is basically, how we would prioritize this. What are the major things that we need? And we'd say, okay, if there was a windfall and anyone said, this is what asked us what we would want this next coming year or immediately, these are the things that we would prioritize as number one. Then we went through 1, 2, and 3. When we presented this to the executive team, they had asked us to kind of go through and outline some dependencies. And so we started that process. And so if we create an imagery repository, what's the dependency there? So you can see in line 4, the dependency would be, we'll probably to have someone who can help us actually manage, maintain, and promote that repository. And so that would be reflected in another priority item, and that would be getting an FTE to fill that role. And then frequency, we tried to define what the frequency would be. Is it ongoing? Is it phased? Is it a one-time only? So that's an OTO. And we did our best to define that. And then we did some compounding increases. So, making sure that we're really keeping track of, not only is this the cost that we would project would be right now, as is, but then making sure we're building in a compounding increase, because if anything, we've just seen technology costs increase over time. And then we did our best to make sure we are outlining that for the next 5 years and then combining the 5-year totals. And then at the base, you'll see the totals for each fiscal year. This MGI base of operations, this is what I believe this is in 2026. This is based off of what the land information plan had for FY23. And so we just took that that rate and dropped it in there, or not that rate, excuse me. That amount, dropped it in there. That does not reflect the true gap of what revenue is coming in at, and we're still defining that because revenue is well, each month it's unveiled on what was collected. So we really, since we are in this new realm of lower collections, it's really hard for us to predict right now without doing a deeper dive, probably with some economists, of what the new projections could look like. So we, I can't really project that. That's based on what we expected to have about 2 years ago. So I will hand it over to Jenny and let you lead the discussion. And if you want to see anything else, if I can describe anything further, I've got both Michael and Troy on the line today, and they can help us work through that.
Thanks, Erin. I'm going to open it up for questions in just a second, or comments, but I just want to say how much I appreciate staff going through this effort. We've really focused on trying to be more future oriented. Like Erin said, sometimes opportunities come along and we don't want to be flat-footed. We want to have the information ready so that we can take advantage of those opportunities. And then, like Erin said too, as we're facing these revenue shortfalls, I think going through this effort helps us better understand where we can have an impact with the funding that we have and how we can best prioritize the funding that we had. I know that the work that we talked about earlier from the theme stewards is going to help inform this effort going forward. This is information that I can use with the State Library Commission and with the legislature and others to demonstrate that we do have a good, clear understanding of the costs that are involved in, like Erin said, really maintaining Montana spatial data infrastructure and carrying that forward into the future. So I'm just really, really excited that they went to this effort to put this together for us. I think this is something that we can continue to update and maintain over time, and I think it's going to be just an incredibly useful tool for us. Really welcome your thoughts, feedback, comments about this gap analysis itself, anything that we missed that you'd like to see, that you have questions about, and so forth.
Are there any other operations that aren't on the list that maybe are priority 4, 5, or 6 that would percolate to the top if money was to come in? Have you identified any more other than these top 1, 2, and 3 items?
That's a great question. No, at this point, we have not. I'm sure we could come up with more. But no, as it stands now, no, we have not.
Well, I have that in my operation, always have. It's like, if all these other ones get done and they're fully funded, then we bring some of these others forward. I just wonder if anything else was ever identified. I mean, maybe this is all we ever really need to do, but maybe there's other wish list items that are out there. Not that we have to do that. I was just wondering if there were more.
I believe the process of going through each of the theme data improvement plans and their theme development plans, I believe, will likely see more flushed out.
I agree. I think that's an important aspect of that work.
And I will say that, kind of to add to what Jenny had just stated, there there some of these things that are in here, you know, every legislative session, well, at least one of the more frequent ones, recent ones, not frequent. We've had basic questions like what would it cost, you know, to just complete the PLSS work? And, you know, so we give these outrageous dollar amounts. And so this is kind of like taking a more, I guess, phased approach and creating a program to improve the CAT SDI over time. And then we're seeing in other states that, you know, like Minnesota just announced a remonumentation program. The state of Utah has a remonumentation program. And so like, as we see other states successful programs that could benefit ours, I think that, you know, when those are presented, something that we find that could be very valuable, or the federal government comes up with a new program, kind of similar to 3DEP and now LE Hydro, I believe those are when those things arise, they will start to make their way into this analysis.
Do you think some of these questions might come up during the legislative session, where they might definitely ask, hey, how much do you think it would cost to do one of these? Now you've got it defined. So I think it's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yep. Yeah, you know, I think definitely perhaps through our budget hearing, but more as we're seeing these kinds of bills pop where, you know, they want us to add data to certain maps, or be able to map new data, etc. I think this information would be very helpful to articulate that need. If you're not familiar with the legislative process, when a bill comes forward, we're always asked to provide a fiscal note. What might it cost to meet the intent of this bill? And this information would be really helpful for that.
I think the other thing that I would like to highlight is that once this is out there, and well, it is published and out there now, but when this gets migrated or integrated in with the geospatial information plan, which I believe it'll be like an appendix to that, or just a part of the document itself, then we've taken the time and the process to go through and outline these items that we feel are, you know, a major priority for the Montana State Library to, you know, be successful in developing spatial data infrastructure and supporting the MGIA. Well, then we hope that you, as council members and as geospatial professionals, if and when you are working on a project and you would need to, you know, insert this type of information, this could be a resource for you all to utilize. And so once we show that this is documented and as a need, then you guys can reference, and the geospatial community can reference this as something that has been prioritized.
Any other thoughts, feedback, questions?
I'm with Alan on this. I think this is, you and your team, you know, you and everyone over there at the library, and did you know, this is nice. This is good. This is going to be informative, and I like that. What you just said is that this is something that if local government has needs, or they can reflect upon this and how it could, you know, go in towards that coordination of efforts possibly as well. So nice to have out there now. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Jenny, you want to move to the next?
Thanks for your positive feedback. Really appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is just an update on the future of the MGIA grant program. And we have a link in our standing reports to our collections dashboard. At this point, we are not comfortable moving forward with an FY26 grant award. The collections are really on par with what we were seeing last year. I don't want anybody to be alarmed by the December numbers, because typically, as more information comes in on a monthly basis, we are able to update that information. But based on the revenues that we were seeing in the first 5 months of the fiscal year, we're really sort of on par with what we saw last fiscal year. And so I'm not anticipating that we would have any more funding available to move forward with an FY26 grant program. And we don't have the MGA plan in place that announces those priorities for grant awards anyway. So we wanted to make that information available to the council, and then to let you know about an internal review that we're conducting. We did mention this to the council last meeting, and we've decided to use this opportunity to really take a deep dive into the grant program itself. So we're conducting an internal review of a variety of different kinds of aspects of the grant program, from looking at a historical review of the grants that have been awarded and the impact that those grants have had on outcomes that we've wanted to address, like improvements to the spatial data infrastructure, building geospatial capacity at the local level, supporting regional GIS work, etc. So we're going to be doing sort of a historical review, and then looking at the amount of funding that's available, how we can maybe award grants in order to really meet the priorities of the Geospatial Information Plan. Also looking at staffing and internal resources like grant management software to understand how we can make overall improvements to the administration of the grant program, etc. We have given ourselves about a 7 or 8 month timeline to conduct this internal review. The idea being that we would bring that back to the council at your September meeting. And then, of course, we'll continue to monitor revenues. And if it looks like revenues are starting to rebound to a point where we think we can recommend an FY27 grant cycle, that would give us time to make sure that the Geospatial Information Plan reflects the grant priorities that we would want to announce. I should mention too, one aspect of the internal review is just the timing of grant awards. We updated the administrative rules for the grant program, as you know, to allow for 2-year grant cycles. And so we want to really think about how the grant cycle itself plays into our ability to meet the goals and priorities that are laid out in the Geospatial Information Plan. So our hope is to bring this internal review to the council in September, and to use that review then to inform the next grant cycle whenever we're able to offer those grant awards. Any questions about where we are with the grant program?
Jenny, this is Maureen. I just hope that they can start the grant program up again in 2027. And I like that idea too, because it would be an offset year from legislature, so you aren't piling all that work together in 1 year.
That's right. Absolutely. Thanks, Maureen. I appreciate that. And we certainly hope we can bring it back.
Jenny, quick question on that. Are we banking any money from the prior, for the prior ones that we did not fund, or is that money not there? I just was wondering if we were setting anything aside from, we cancel it in 25, we won't do it in 26. Will we have any extra in 27 or not?
We don't really bank any money, and Aaron, we can put a link into the financial dashboard so you can see there was a balance at the end of FY24. So we ended the fiscal year with, I think it was about $600,000 at the end of the fiscal year. So that amount is in the bank, so to speak. And then we built our budget for MGF funds, assuming I think it was just under $1 million budget, with expectations that we might collect somewhere around 1.2 million in collections. So anything that we don't spend in FY25 again would stay in the bank. So there are collections there that give us a buffer. If we are short on collections, having that money in the bank would allow us to get through FY25 without having to make the kinds of cuts that we had to make last year. And so that's sort of where we're banking, and any reserve funds that are in the account would then be taken into consideration when we're building the FY26 budget. So it's a matter of looking at what's in the bank, looking at what we think will be collected in the next fiscal year, and building a budget that doesn't overspend that amount and leaves a little bit in the bank going forward. I think maybe to answer your question, are we banking money that we can spend on the grant program? Not really. It just goes into our overall budget planning. Did I answer your question, Alan?
Yeah, I think so. I guess we probably don't have a way to, keep it. I mean, just like any budget, you can't carry over some of those funds probably.
Right. We don't carry over our appropriation. We have to spend out our appropriation each fiscal year. But there was a little bit of a ending fund balance in that account at the end of last fiscal year because of the cuts that we made at the end of the fiscal year. And then we have a really conservative budget this year, and assuming that collections come in at about that 1.2 million level, which is what we were projecting, then we would add to that balance a little bit more. We like to have about a 6-month operating balance in that account. That's our goal. As a state, we can't carry more than 2 years operating expenses in that account. And then, so it's really just a matter of looking at the balance of the account and projected revenues, and building a budget for our operations and expenses like a grant program to see what we can afford.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that.
If you have more questions, always feel free to ask. I did want to let you know that we didn't bring a second quarter financial report to the council. Our accountant is dealing with some family health issues. And so we will bring, I hope, a second quarter financial report to your March meeting, and then a third quarter financial report to your May meeting. Spending is happening, and things are looking on track. Like I said, if you look at that collections report, you see a pretty significant drop off in the most recent months. But looking month to month isn't always the most accurate measure of collections, because we do get more information as we move away from the most recent month's collection reports. So I'm not too alarmed by that December number at this point, and we'll watch to see whether it rebounds as we get more information at the end of this month and then moving into next month. Let's see, any more questions about the MGA program or our collections report? Okay. I don't know that Gail is with us. Aaron, do you know if we have a MEGIP report?
I know Gail said she was intending to join the meeting, but in an email chain I was watching yesterday, so
We are a little bit ahead of schedule, so
yeah.
we'll keep watching for her, and if she can, hopefully she can join us. Aaron, do you want to go on with the GIS coordination report?
Yeah, that'd
I'll
be
send
great.
her a quick note.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I think we kind of predicted 11 maybe for her.
Yeah, and we're getting
not too
close
far
to it.
off. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I have a short report, but I just wanted to update some of the activities and events that we've got going on and just some other important stuff. So this will be pretty short because we've already had a lot of really great discussion on what we are working on for the strategic plan and you know, some of the work on the geospatial information plan, the grant program itself. So just wanted to fill you in on some of our upcoming activities or things that we have done already this calendar year. So we had a library legislative night that was hosted by the Montana Library Association. That was on January 9th, and I think it went really well. Had a lot of great discussions about the cadastral. Those are usually some of the bigger topics about imagery, about LiDAR. So how that is run, if you've never been, in the library rotunda, the different programs set up tables, and the leads and other key staff join. And it's like a little reception that's held for the legislators just to come down and get introduced to what we do and just have nice conversations about all of our awesome work. And so it was pretty nice to be a part of this year. It was low key because we don't have any legislation out there right now for GIS, so I thought it was wonderful. And it's always good to speak with legislators and meet new ones and connect with you know, more senior legislators. So and then just to highlight some of our upcoming outreach and coordination and things that we've got going on. Michael and Bob are going to do a series of Highline County visits, kind of addressing next gen initiative issues and topics, addressing and transportation. But because they are so well versed in many of our topics, that's probably not going to be the only thing that they are going to be discussing. And so they'll be hitting the road next week, actually, to visit some of our stakeholders and data providers, partners up on the Highline. So looking forward for those, connecting with those folks, and then, you know, hearing any kind of feedback that that the local governments are interested in providing. We've got the annual MARLS, so that's a Registered Land Surveyors Conference. That's going to be in Billings, February 17th through the 21st. I know MEGIP is going to be a part of that. And then, so we have been regularly attending the conference for a very long time, and our presentations are usually pretty well received. We are working with both Dan Staley and other key members of the MARLS board and leadership team to get registered and to kind of see where we're needed. And so they actually reached out to us and asked us to provide a hands-on workshop, something similarly that we provided to the Planners Association, basically kind of like how to access our services, and then some hands-on learning tips and tricks and techniques of using the data. And so it was really well received at the Planners Conference. And so it was asked to be delivered to registered land surveyors. So we're working out the details with staff and then the MARLS leadership team and or conference team. And then we will be attending the MACO midwinter conference, just basically to have that opportunity to continue to coordinate with our county commissioners, and then any other elected officials and attendees that are kind of the usual suspects at those meetings. It's a really great conference. It's always held during legislative session in Helena, so that the commissioners have the opportunity to get to this legislature and and coordinate on key topics with those folks. And so yeah, we're looking forward to attending the MACO Midwinter Conference, and then we've got NISJIC Midyear coming up in at the end of February as well. It kind of overlaps this conference. I am going to be presenting on tribal coordination with the executive director and president of the National Tribal GIS Center. His name's Garrett Couch, for those of you that know him. I highly recommend the conference at the end of April. For those of you that do interact with tribes or are part of the tribal communities, it's an annual conference in Albuquerque. So that's just kind of like a sidebar, but Garrett Couch and his team puts that on. And then then we have our MGA council meeting in March, at the end of March, followed up by our big annual to do with MAGIP, which I'm sure Gail's gonna talk about. Hopefully she's gonna jump on. I don't want to take all of the fun out of her presentation, but we will be attending that. Luckily, it's here in Helena, and our staff is working through what we're going to present. It's likely going to be a lot on our initiatives, and then just MSDI theme development, strategic planning, and I think someone is doing a hands-on workshop. So that is where we're at there. And then one other thing I wanted to let you all be aware of. You might have seen this in some of the papers. There was a legislative audit conducted about appraising new construction to reduce property tax inequity. And the legislative audit division, they actually use GIS, and we're frequently, they're pretty big users actually, and we help get them training and help manage their AGUL account, and encourage them to use story maps. And it was really awesome when they produced this full report, that they also included a story map. And so I will link to this in the chat, but I just wanted to pull it up here as well, and wanted to highlight one of the recommendations. This has been out there for over a month now. I think it was mid-December, or early December, but I wanted to just basically highlight their recommendations, specifically recommendation number 3. And so basically the recommendation by legislative audit to help work on the issue at hand of appraising new construction to reduce property tax inequity was to recommend that the Department of Revenue obtain high quality or oblique aerial imagery independently or as a part of a collaborative effort with other agencies facilitated by the Montana State Library. And so some of the auditors have attended our imagery events. They're part of working groups. They're becoming more active because they're big users of our GIS information, and they want to understand not only how to use the data, but they want to understand how it's created, how we coordinate the updates and the creation and budgets and whatnot. And so we've done a lot of work to just further inform this member of state professionals on how this information is collected. And so I just wanted to update you all and let you know that this is out there for your review, and that a recommendation was made to collect and create an imagery program to reduce some of these issues that the Department of Revenue is showing. But I would like to also highlight that this is just one reason to have statewide imagery, and Troy and I are working on, like I said earlier, that needs assessment and inventory of the uses of current or future imagery programs, and then also historic. So I think it was really awesome to see, number one, that they used a story map, and then number two, that we are continually recognized as this authoritative data provider and subject matter expert when it comes to geospatial information. And that's it. It's pretty short, Jenny.
Great. Thanks. Are there any questions for Aaron? Right. I want to welcome Gail. Gail, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Always thrilled to be here.
Great. We're ready for your Make-It report.
Yeah, so actually have a lot of really great things to report today. Conference planning is well underway. We actually have identified our keynote speaker, who will be Scott Oppman, ArcGIS Solutions Director for Esri. They're going to be putting out a social media report. Actually, you may have already seen it. And Jeff Hedstrom will also be doing an email blast to let people know. We have 5 sponsor commitments thus far, which is always really important because without our awesome sponsors, yeah, we just wouldn't be able to do the great conference that we usually do. Call for presentation deadline was extended to January 24th. So far, we have 15 presentation proposals as of yesterday. And on February, I can't believe I'm already saying February, we're going to be putting together the schedule, which is going to be super fun to get that done. And then I noticed that you brought up the webpage. Thank you for doing that. And I want to call out that we've actually extended the conference to include Friday. So we're going to be looking at having technical sessions on Friday. And when we're in Helena, we recognize that there are a lot of people that actually live in that area and don't necessarily need to pay for a hotel room, but would love the opportunity to have an in-person technical session. So we did extend the day, which I think we're going to be really interested to see how having that extra day goes over for our conference. The plan is to be tentatively hoping to open registration on February 10th. But I will tell you, if you do need a hotel, the hotel block is open to go ahead and get your registration for your hotel room. So that's good to go. We also would like to take the opportunity to ask MGIA Council to participate and to let me know maybe prior to February 4th, if you're planning on having a roundtable again, or if you need to have time on the schedule, just let us know so that we can get you booked. And then again, we extended the conference through Friday. And then one other thing that we're going to do, we're going to have a local government SIG meeting in person. Generally, those meetings, they're once a month and they're over a Zoom meeting. And we're going to take the opportunity to actually have those people that are really committed to attending those meetings and staying up to date with GIS opportunities and training through that local government SIG venue in person. I'd like to kind of give you an update on some of the technical sessions that are planned. We're looking at Experience Builder again. Tessa, who is our technical committee chair, reached out to Kara Utter, who is with Geospatial Training Services. So Experience Builder is awesome. It's amazing. And it's also getting updated very quickly through Esri's ArcGIS Online platform. So Kara's completely remaking the intro course to Experience Builder. I think it's going to be available at this conference. If you've taken an experience builder course before and haven't really used it, or if you're using it but are still maybe struggling because there's just so many things that you can do with it, we recommend that course. Eric Pimpler is going to be teaching ArcGIS Pro. We have Survey 123 Connect. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but one of the new things that we're hoping to offer is an open data source. So using Python to process drone imagery. So that's just super exciting. We've gotten a lot of feedback that people would like to have opportunities to learn some open source stuff. So we listened, and we're trying to make those tech sessions available. So that's all the updates I have for conference planning. I do have a GIS Day update. So the last time we met in November, GIS Day either had just occurred or was going to be occurring the next week. So I hadn't given an update, but this year GIS Day was a huge success, even bigger than the previous year. We had 6. So Megan actually supported sorry, I'm just trying to think of what we're calling them, the sessions. So the get-togethers, we had Great Falls, Helena, MSU Bozeman, Billings, and Missoula all had events that were planned, and across those 6 events, we had 144 people attend, and then the application traffic showed that we had 1,184 views on GIS Day. So that would have been across Montana. We were super excited to see that kind of participation in GIS Day. It's a really big event for us. And then the web map competition entries, there were 16. And I'd really like to give a shout out to the people that won the map contest. So there was a first, second, and third place. Amy Wally won with Montana Mountain Ranges. Eddie Webb won second place with GVLT Conserved Lands. That is just amazing. And then John Dreesen won third place with McCall Idaho Trail Guide. I'm actually from Idaho. McCall's a beautiful place. If you haven't had a chance to visit, encourage it. Yeah, and then one other thing I'd like to point out is in the actual mapping contest itself, there were the top 5 individuals were Jamie McFadden, he mapped twice as many as anybody else. Tessa Schweitzer, who actually works for the city of Bozeman, go Tessa. Jeff Hedstrom, Montana State Library, and then Ken Bixby, and I'm not sure, somebody with Williams. And so super excited to have the opportunity for Megget to support those get-togethers and GIS Day. And yeah, and with that, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Congratulations on a really successful GIS Day, and thank you for the invitation to participate in the conference. We will definitely give that some thought and get back to you. Any questions for Gail? All right. Gail, we always appreciate your reports to the council. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Gail, I have a quick question. Sorry, I just saw it. It says ages 13 plus. Did you have any kids?
You know, that's a really great question. So I know that last year, Jeff Sprock, who was the GIS manager in Billings and moved to the IT manager in Billings, did have children participate. He brought his own children, and they were part of the mapping that occurred at the in-person meeting. I didn't hear anything about this year, but I could certainly find out.
Great.
Cool.
Any other questions for Gail? Right. All right. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? All right. Hearing none, if there's no more business before the council, we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your participation, your really helpful feedback for our efforts.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, thanks, Jenny.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
We'll talk to
Thank
you all
you.
soon.